Dr. Huang, as one of the report's authors. You guys have essentially boiled happiness down to a formula. Like, you have a model that determines how happy a country is going to be. And I don't want to, bore everyone with tons and tons of math, but I do want to know what the biggest misconception is about what makes people happy, what's important to happiness, and what's less important to happiness as we get into this conversation.
I think by this stage, it's pretty much well understood that income is not the only thing that matters for happiness. So income is the #1 variable in our model. But besides income, we also have other things that we know, and most of you already know, that matters for life, which is social support, how much support you get from your family and your friends, and also in terms of how sociable you behave in a way. Do you volunteer? Do you donate money, generosity to other people? Mm-hmm. And do you trust your government, business organizations, so on and so forth? And the sense of freedom in making your life choice. We know these things matter, so they are in our model. To the extent that income is beneficial to happiness, that is true in our model. You run the regression, you got a highly significant coefficient. But while that is true, if high income is leading to some other things, more stressful life, and also less sense of security, we know that matters. And also that can lead to the decline in happiness instead of increase in happiness. So income is a very complicated relationship with happiness, while low income, definitely we know that's not good. But the pursuit of a higher income, if it comes with other costs, that's not good for happiness either. I wouldn't say that's a misconception, but this is something that is confirmed again and again in our model.
So money does buy some happiness, but also more money can mean more problems.
Yes.
Yeah. As we all know. But so what I want to move to what I thought was maybe the most interesting contrast in the whole report. And I think the big theme is that, or one of the big trends we saw in it overall, is that the US, we're having this kind of crisis of youth happiness, right? You're seeing the young people are just less and less satisfied with their lives. At the same time, in Eastern Europe and Central Europe, you're seeing these big increases in happiness. And they're moving up the trends. And I'm curious, well, just why are those two things happening simultaneously? And what can that tell us about what creates happiness?
It is a mystery. It is something that is truly shocking. I have in front of me some statistics about younger generation, the generation Y and younger, their happiness and how they feel in their life, about their life. In the US and Canada, I wouldn't say much about other countries at the moment because I spent some time looking at US and Canada in the past while we are writing this report. Something that we see is that it's not who they are. Yes, first of all, the background. The younger generation has been, over the past 15 years, feeling less happy. The older generation, they are doing okay. So the big question is that, are these two different generations? Do they do different things? Is that the reason why they are less happy? Or maybe it's the feeling, how they feel about their life that's different. So I wouldn't bore you with too much statistics here, but basically the general conclusion is that it's not who they are, they're quite similar. The younger generation kind of have a more highly educated, they're more likely to have, compared to the past, more likely to have jobs compared to 10, 15 years ago, more likely to have jobs. Their income has increased, not much, but increased. And they're also more sociable in some sense. They're more likely to donate money, and they are more likely to do sociable things in general. So it's not who they are that lead to, or what they do that leads to lower happiness. Instead, what really matters?
On every level, they're richer, they have more jobs, they do the things they're supposed to make you happy.
Richer is and
also
they're more compared to housing costs and blah, blah.
Yeah.
So income, but there's a whole bunch of other things going on besides income. So, okay. So, but the income is high, so compared to the past. But it's really what they feel that has changed now. So I have a brief summary here. Yeah, it's not what they are, it's not what they do socially. It appears it's really that they are more likely they feel, this is really what they feel that is different. They feel less, the young generation now compared to the young generation about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, now they feel less supported by family and friends, less freedom to make life choice, less likely to feel satisfied with their living standard. They are more likely to feel worried and stress.
So it's an emotional crisis.
Yeah, their perception of corruption has risen substantially. Their confidence in government has fallen.
So it's a little bit of an emotional, spiritual crisis. Alden, I know that you've been paying special attention to, I guess, this decline in youth happiness as one of the advisors on the Global Wellbeing Project. What's your take on what's happening?
Yeah, so again, thank you for inviting me. So back in 2022, a study we did in collaboration with Gallup, we found that youths in high-income countries prioritize feeling stable and secure, in terms of their happiness and well-being. But youths in upper middle-income countries prioritize feeling content. So we kind of see the differences.
What are those two? What's the distinction there?
Yeah, so I think the distinction, based on how we saw it was the priority, prioritizing feeling stable and secure is more about the outward world. It's about what's happening outside. So when we talk about how, climate change, for example, the new, all of these kind of different issues that are happening in an outside world, that kind of ruffles the feathers a little bit in terms of our feelings of stability and security. But feeling content, I think it's more about what's happening inside, internally. So it's more of a, we do with what we have, and kind of that is those feelings of contentment.
Is it oversimplifying to say that, US, Canadian, maybe European youth are basically just overwhelmed by what they're seeing on TikTok or Instagram every day, whereas maybe in some of these other countries where happiness is improving or is on the upswing, they're a little bit more inward directed. They're not so just overly plugged in.
I think research has really shown the impact of social media use and kind of intentional spend in terms of and how it affects kind of well-being among youth. I think it's a huge determinant. I'm sure there are many others that the other panelists could talk about as well.
Dr. Goldin, you're an economist. You also helped create the first Youth Wellbeing Index. And I guess one thing that really surprised me about this report is that, the countries that are, there seems to be this malaise among youth in very rich countries and a sense of happiness in, places that are growing, but they're middle income at best, right? Like, again, the Lithuanias of the world. What does that tell us about the way the economy plays into happiness? Like, is it growth that matters? Is it just the level of wealth? What's key here?
Yeah, I think, well, thanks for having me. It's great to be part of this conversation. And I kind of go back to my yes and, right? Because it's all of those things. In the opening video, there's a comment about wealth, not health, or health, not wealth. And we see, again, the importance of income, but it's really about, one word that hasn't come up when we've been talking about youth so far is aspiration. And I think when we look at young people's well-being and their view of well-being, a lot of it is about aspiration. And it's also about their relationship with their peers, very in particular, their relationship, their status in their communities and their families. And that's not something that's specific to young people in wealthier countries, but we really see that around the world. In the Global Youth Wellbeing Index, which I can't believe will have its 10-year anniversary next month, we developed that. We had 40 indicators in 6 domains, and we also worked with Gallup because one of the things that was sort of a first in that is about a quarter of those 40 indicators were subjective indicators. So we really tried to look at and bring together the data about the environment and the systems and the institutions, which is something we heard in the earlier panel, and how they're serving young people, as well as what you might say is the sort of observed data. What is the data on youth unemployment? What is the data on youth mortality, so on and so forth, safety and security, education, but also how do young people feel about it? Because that's where we found there's often this big disconnect. And one thing that we haven't talked about, which I think is really critical when we talk about the mental health crisis that we're seeing among young people and how that's really contributing, is the pandemic. I think, one of the things in the report was it talked about the impact of the pandemic, but we really see how young people on the economic side, this generation of young people has kind of come through bookend economic crises, right? If you look at the financial crisis in 2008, many of them are kind of still reeling from the economic impact, and they were disproportionately hit by that jobs crisis, and now into today. So it was interesting to hear you say that this, Haifang say this idea that there's economic opportunity, because a lot of young people don't feel that. They are still experiencing the highest youth unemployment rates in many countries. The COVID shutdowns, particularly of the schools, and the isolation that drove, as well as the kind of educational losses and what that means for their economic trajectories. The World Bank estimated that to be potential $21 trillion in income lost from this generation. So when we put that all together, it really comes down to not only what is the data telling us, but how are young people feeling about these? And they're so interlinked, which is the last piece I'll say for now, is this idea that, the economics, the health, the education, they're all related, right? If you are not feeling well, if you don't have health, you're not going to learn well, you're not going to have good learning outcomes, it's going to affect your jobs and your earning expectations down the road. So all those things together, I think, really match up.
While that segues perfectly to my question for Dr. Parekh. You're sort of a public health wonk, right? That's sort of, I think, you've been in the administration at Bipartisan Policy Center. You look at an array of public health issues for both the old and young. Do you see the declining happiness among youth in the West as a public health problem or a symptom of one? And also, are there policy responses like that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. And in full disclosure, I must say, so my name, Anand, is Indian origin, and in Sanskrit means happiness. And so every time I hear my name, I feel obligated, I remind myself to be happy here. But yes, as a physician, I can say there are two trends that concern me. And one is, as Nicole mentioned, we have a youth mental health challenge and a crisis in this country post-pandemic. We have seen youth suicides, youth overdose deaths, feelings of sadness, hopelessness increase in our youth. We're actually focused on that at the Bipartisan Policy Center. I think safe use of social media is critical, looking at the healthcare delivery system, looking at schools, communities. So I think that is important. But then, Jordan, you mentioned the other side of the spectrum. We are also looking at social isolation and loneliness amongst older adults in this country. Mm-hmm. We don't have sort of an intergenerational culture in this country. We have millions of Americans, older adults, who are living alone. And there's profound health impacts, preventable healthcare cost impacts for this population as well. And so when I look at both the young and the old, the thread that runs through it is the importance of talking about these issues, well-being, mental health, destigmatizing these issues. First, we need to talk about them, raise awareness, and then design policies and programs to address them.
We have about a minute left, so I feel like, if you could pick one policy right now, like that would make, America's youth happier. Like if there was one, is there something that you would push? Like, what's at the top of your list?
Yeah, well, I'm going to give sort of a tie for three, but look, I think we need to get a handle on social media use, right? The safe use of social media, and policymakers are looking at that. Second, we need to do a better job screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment for our youth for mental health. And then third, youth are spending most of their day at schools, right? And really, are we leveraging schools and community resources to support our youth in this country?
Great. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for this panel, but thank you all for this discussion. It was really informative.
Thank you.
Thank you.